As an individual, I've always been a collector. So when I was a young guy, I would start off with things like coins and stamps and some toys and comics. Like any other kid, you get addicted to a certain item and you want to keep building a collection. As the years went on, I decided to try to get back some of my childhood items. So what I did is I went around collecting Star Wars figures, which was my go-to as I got older.
Why is it that everybody has different interests? Right? Some people like to collect sports memorabilia. Some people like to collect model cars. Right? Others like to collect, I don't know, Hello Kitty figurines. Right? So everybody has something different. But I think it goes back to the idea that that's the interest that they've somehow come up with, perhaps even as a young child, right? Something that brings them joy, and I think that's a big piece around it. What brings them happiness?
My name's Brandon, and I collect boomboxes. I was inspired by my dad mostly. From a young age, like 9, 10 years old, we used to go to toy shows a lot, almost every weekend. He was the biggest influence on me, him and his friends, because they collected a lot of stuff they liked too, and it just kind of made an impression on myself.
What do I collect? I collect vintage vinyl. I collect video games, which is another thing that's really taking off. Your 80s Nintendos, Atari, ColecoVision, and television, early PlayStation games. I collect vintage toys such as Star Wars, Dungeons and Dragons, Beetlejuice, Ghostbusters, and a little bit of things that just kind of make me happy and take me back to my childhood.
As a kid, I definitely had baseball cards, hockey cards. I did have model cars, and as I went into my adolescent years, I had more radio-controlled cars. I think in children, there's definitely that higher tendency to collect. And again, I think because as children, you start to develop interests. Right? And like I mentioned before, you want to start learning about different things and things that, again, bring you joy.
It's pop culture, right? So pop culture is everywhere. Everything you see, everything you touch is pop culture. Everybody collects something, and I've always said this, you get the weirdest, I mean, I just heard recently a guy collects boom boxes. I mean, where does that come from, right? Everything kind of relates to somebody, so you know, you have that young kid that grew up watching Star Wars, and then here he is, as he was growing up, he would buy figures or come across figures, and next thing you know, he's an adult trying to get his collection back from his youth. So I think everything I sell here, there's somebody that comes in that can relate to something.
I guess it's a lot of stuff that I grew up with. I kind of just want to, because I watch a lot of like shows and stuff that were probably 80s or 90s based that my dad grew up with, and he kind of showed it to us, so I collect a lot of that era stuff. And the boomboxes do tie into that era because I do listen to that kind of music too. Well, now it's completely different with a style of hip-hop, but in terms of like 80s or 90s hip-hop, I feel like it's completely different because they actually like portrayed a message in their music, whereas today it's just like money, drugs, girls, cars. And then back then it was more like people actually struggling and trying to make it day to day.
You know, as a kid, I really liked baseball cards, right? I know they're not a thing anymore. But as a kid, I really liked baseball cards. So I collected them, and I took pride in having these collections, right? And I took a sense of responsibility to put them all into nice sleeves and keep them in mint condition, right? So I think it really depends on that psychological process of happiness and joy and interest, and the sense of pride and responsibility that you take in that collection that you have. Yeah.
I feel like my boomboxes would represent the kind of music I listen to, the comic books, the action figures would represent the kind of movies, TV shows, and stuff that I like. It's all just extended versions of my hobbies, I guess.
My collection, people know me as a bit of a jokester and someone who's a little bit of a nerd, and nerds are cool, by the way. It reflects my personality because I'm a guy that kind of enjoys stuff from the early 80s, the early 70s. Sorry, I'm a guy that enjoys stuff from the 70s and 80s and even the early 90s. And a lot of the kind of items and toys that were made that day were just kind of really cheesy, but they're really cool. And being a bit of a jokester and a guy who likes to have fun, I guess you can pertain to my personality a bit. I think when you think about something like an antique, okay, so you realize by looking at an antique what life was like 100 years ago. So, you know, you look at an old butter churner or an object that's like, what the hell is that? So like a Pac-Man, retro Pac-Man. These young kids are looking at Pac-Man and the adults like, well, that's what I spent a quarter, you know, 20 quarters every Saturday on this thing. And that kid's taking a liking to it. So I think it not only is it nostalgic for the adults, it teaches the kids, hey, this was actually a big thing at one time.
It's a history of what they used to be. Like now people don't walk around with boom boxes, they don't blast music that's not through their headphones like for other people to hear. But it's its history, it's where it came from. I feel like it makes it cool. When I do walk around and blast music from it, it kind of like, when people see that, they have like nostalgic memories of the 80s, 90s growing up and seeing that. Me and 2 other collectors created a group called K7 Crew about a year ago. And right now it's just a niche group of collectors that do collect boom boxes in the mostly Toronto area, but we do span across Canada with other collectors. And yeah, it's just a group of collectors for Canada. It would help to preserve culture because almost everybody else in the group is in their 30s, 40s, maybe 50s, and soon they will be old, they won't be collecting, they won't be going out as much. So me collecting boom boxes and walking around and talking about them would, I guess, inspire new collectors in like my age group.
Professionally speaking, I think collecting is a great pastime. It's something that, you know, even as kids, you know, you develop an interest. Perhaps you gain a sense of responsibility with some of the things that you are interested in. You know, let's take cars, for example. If a child likes to collect cars, they might learn a lot just from their collecting. They find more information about how cars work. They create an interest for themselves that, you know, might blossom into something in the future, right? That's a real positive of collecting.
I'm living a dream, and what I'd like to tell the youth today is if there's something you really love doing or enjoy doing, don't do what I did. I waited until I got a little bit older before I went after my dream. When you're young, go after your dream right away.
Collecting really means a lot to me. It allowed me to find myself, meet cool new people I wouldn't have really met on my own, and gave me the opportunity to be a part of something that interests me.